Come here, son, nephew, young man, let me holler at you. This video contains a sample of a self-assessment which will be assigned to my students, or which could be assigned to my students when I teach entrepreneurship, and this comes from the Baton Rouge Area Chamber of Commerce. This will be for entrepreneurship classes and other types of business courses, because you can take assignments and do a cross-curricular type structure for different courses for different purposes. With that being said, I'm not going to do a visual representation. It will be purely auditory. But in this assignment, in this particular, there's a bell. I'm a teacher. We're not going to be able to avoid that. So anyhow, what's going to happen here is there's a survey in which we take, which is a self-assessment. Knowledge of self is important. Students need to understand who they are so they can understand where they are already headed and where they need to go. I'm going to use myself as a guinea pig, and I'll give some sample answers, some of which are totally true, some of which are fabricated just a little, because not everybody needs to know all of my personal business, but it will indeed be a complete example for the students. Now, there are 5 areas of behavior, skills, and capabilities which were measured. The one I ranked highest in was determination, self-motivation, self-discipline, and grit. Second highest would be computer and financial literacy. Third would be personal capabilities and support systems. And I'll be honest, I think my computer and financial literacy information may actually be outdated, or my capabilities, but it is what it is. Last is problem solving and teamwork. I actually think that's my best attribute, but hey, no problem. And last, as far as my rankings on this survey are concerned, are communication skills and comfort engaging with strangers. And it's not that I'm uncomfortable communicating with people, but I do like to get to the point. Maybe I'm getting old, I don't know. So as far as my actual self-assessment are concerned, there are 4 questions based on written responses from myself that I'm going to share. 1, based on this self-assessment, what is your area of greatest personal strength? Please provide at least 2 reasons why this is true. Well, I think they nailed this one on the head with determination, self-motivation, self-discipline, and grit. I found that I can outwork most people, and I'm willing to make sacrifices that many people will not make, which is right in line with my YouTube channel and a going theme of principles of manhood taught to me by my father. I've made at least 2 videos and many references to the importance of men having resilience, being willing to do what it takes, understanding the concept of temporary delayed gratification, or maybe even long-term, in exchange for something greater overall, lasting, even generational. And of course, we're talking about finances, wealth, stability, that type of thing. That matters. Question 2, what are the areas where you'll need encouragement and support after high school to become a successful adult? Please provide 2 examples. So I'm a graduate student with way more than a graduate plus 30. As a matter of fact, I was in a dissertation program. My life is going in a different direction, so I'll return to that later. But the main thing I would like to learn more about is business finance and creating systems. It's one thing when you're starting from scratch, but as you get older and you have a lot more things going, because again, this is different for me than from a high school student. So for me, everything doesn't have to be the wheel recreated again. I'm totally okay with copying working systems, and it's much more efficient at this age. Now, for you younger folks out there, for students listening or anyone who may be listening to this example, if you're young, if you're a teen or in your early 20s, you probably do need to create some things for yourself simply because knowing how to operate a process then helps you to gauge whether or not processes are going to be effective by looking at a few aspects of them. And your miles may vary. But for me, business finance and different structures and learning the current tax system, so forth and so on, to a higher degree, that matters most. If an organization is structured well, if a program or project is structured well, at the very least, you need to make adjustments, but you don't have to start from scratch, especially if you're using a proven model. Question 3. Based on this self-assessment, what have you learned about yourself? 1, I don't really like surveys. This is going to vary for anybody. There's no right or wrong answer here. This is what you know or think about you. I don't like the surveys is observation number 1. And 2 is, look, I'll live. I'll do whatever it takes to help my students to be okay. It ain't going to kill me. It's not the end of the world. But when I have a forced situation where, like when there's a meeting or something and everybody has to introduce themselves, I can't stand that. I don't like being superficial. I don't like empty conversation. I don't like small talk that doesn't matter. I don't know. When I'm in a particular situation to take care of business, I'm more interested in the person who I'm doing business with. Everyone else, they're great people, I'm sure, but you know, I like things to be natural and organic, not forced, but that's just me. And I honestly think that's neither here nor there. I don't think that was a poorly shaped question. I just happen to be a quirky individual. Please don't judge me. Question 4. Do you think you might ever start your own business as an entrepreneur? Well, I have some control over a small project that my mother does, so I get the general gist. And if there's a program or project rather that we want to take on, we know how. But as far as the ownership portion, I let mom take care of that, and I simply control. Uh-oh. Let's see if I can.
All students tardy who have not made it into the classrooms from lunch. Please be sure to mark all tardies from students coming back from lunch.
Okay. Sorry about that. My apologies. When I'm in work mode, that's when I need to talk about work. So this is a work-related deal, but it does need to be recorded. It just kind of is what it is. My apologies. So as far as me becoming an entrepreneur, yeah, I'd like to give it a shot eventually. And I like the idea of having options. You know, it used to be a given that you can just go work a place for 30 years. I tell my students this all the time. Retire, live happily ever after with a picket fence and a dog and do barbecues on the weekend and that type of thing. But life in 2022 is just a little bit different. The economy is not what it used to be. I'm not going to get into my personal political beliefs here, although it's probably not what you think. I will say this. I'm a registered independent, and I will cut the politic part at that. But with that being said, with so much uncertainty in the air, and this being the first time that we've seen the type of governmental shift with the CV-19, here I go with my personal views again, with the lockdowns and things of that nature, I just think it's wise for people to have options. And business is risky. It's taxing. I'm so glad my mother is such a wonderful owner. So it's a good place. It's a good option to have. It's a good skill to have. That's why I want this class taught. I'm glad that I'm able to get this certification so I can bring it to my students, because a lot of times I hear people talk about what's not taught in school, and I think people just don't know everything that's available to them. One issue that we have, and I'm going a little bit off topic, but I think it's necessary. One issue that we have in some schools is that when students come to us, they have some deficiencies in skills. So to try to go immediately into talking about business finance with a student, for example, who has poor math skills, it turns the assignment, it turns the objective into something else. When an objective was related to teaching financial math, if you have a person who doesn't understand basic math, you have a choice. You have to try to either meet that person in between or go all the way back to the beginning and remediate. And it can be difficult at times, but it is what it is. We're educators. We're up for the challenge, right? All right. So what I've learned from doing this self-assessment, and I want to say, I'd like to say what I've learned just from being an educator overall. The world is changing. Values of people are changing. Values of students are changing. And a lot of things that we took for granted and that we expected for students to have by a certain age, they may or may not have, or things have changed so much that some things I thought I knew has become outdated. So the concept of a lifelong learner has taken on a much different role, responsibility, and place in my life. So I found myself having to adjust, ask more questions to students, be open-minded, and just understand part of the challenge of learning is that nobody receives information the same way. There's a sender, there's receiver, and then there's everything in between, which could either A, conduct good communication or B, hinder it, and you have to understand how to overcome all of those obstacles. As far as my career plans are concerned, I would like to teach until I have some form of retirement. I may go into a different type of school system in another state or another form. I may continue to manage operations for my mother and work for her. I may do something different altogether. The world is changing so fast to where you might think you know something, but as new innovations become available, more readily available and accessible to the common man, what we thought we might not be able to do or like to do or even want to do can change drastically. So I'm not going to set that in stone, but I know I don't want to work forever. And developing different systems for different streams of revenue are paramount. Having more than one way to support yourself is very necessary, but the goal eventually is financial freedom. Thank you for listening. For anyone who's viewing this presentation as an example of how to complete assignments, or an assignment, this particular assignment. And as for my YouTube viewers, thank you so much for watching. And as always, never lose the will to win and never lose the will to survive.